kind of crazy to think that the iPhone 6s was released almost 9 years ago. It was released in September of 2015. And honestly, a lot has changed since then. You have phones that can run console level games, you have phones that have under display fingerprint scanners, and so much more. It's just insane to me how much phones changed since this phone. 9 years ago, the iPhone 6s was seen as the top of the line for smartphones. But since it's 9 years old, it'll definitely be interesting to take a look back at what made this phone so great and how it holds up now. Let's get started with this review. Even 9 years later, I still really like the design of this phone. We've got an aluminum back, aluminum sides, and a glass front. Apple's basically kept this design all the way until 2024 because the latest iPhone SE still has almost the exact same design. Really the only difference is that the back is glass and also the antenna bands are hidden. But clearly Apple knew that it was doing something right, so it kept this design. One awesome thing is definitely the headphone jack, which is something that wasn't in the iPhone 7, which was after this phone. It's actually really nice to see this headphone jack on this phone because I kind of expected at the time that the headphone jack wasn't going to be around. One thing I think a lot of people were hoping for though was a stereo speaker setup, which is something we do not have. Overall though, if we're looking at the design, it's really nice. It feels really good in the hand, and I still like it just as much as it came out 9 years ago. The display of this phone is definitely somewhere where this phone shows its age. Looking on apple.com here, we have a Retina HD display, which means that you really won't see pixels even if you look really close, as well as a 1334 by 750 pixel resolution, and 326 ppi is Retina. But definitely the biggest issue with this display is these bezels. They are kind of a bit big for 2024. Most smartphones in 2024 have just a tiny hole punch camera or maybe no hole punch camera at all because it's under the display. Let's also see how well the display brightness performs now. So we're kind of in the shadows right here, but let's walk out to the sun. This is on full max brightness and it will adjust. Okay, so it's the middle of the day and you really cannot see much. It is an IPS LCD and wow, yeah. The display definitely shows its age with the lack of brightness. At the time, this display was pretty great, but nowadays it's definitely lacking in basically every area. So we have two cameras in total. We have a 12 megapixel main camera on the back and a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. This was actually a pretty major upgrade from the iPhone 6, the previous generation, due to the front camera and also the back camera getting improved because the iPhone 6 had a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera and an 8 megapixel rear camera. It was also the first iPhone to record 4K, so that is a great thing to see. So I'm gonna post some samples and let me know what you guys think. Here we go, we're doing 4K, 30 FPS on the iPhone 6s. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about the camera because I'm going to give my thoughts basically. So what I'm seeing is that it does have a very similar look to actually the newer iPhones. It's just a lot less detail, a lot noisier, and does not do too well with HDR. It's kind of mediocre for 2024. Front-facing camera I kind of feel the same about. I mean, actually it doesn't look terrible, especially compared to that iPhone 6. There's a lot more detail, and it doesn't extremely blow out the background like you can see right here, but then it darkens my face if I go in any like super light environment, any backlit situation. So yeah. Oh, by the way, This is 1080p at 30 fps because there's no 4K on the front-facing camera, but at the time this was actually pretty good, so this is basically the best you're gonna get for a 2015 phone right here. And I will say, like, for 2015 it's not bad, but 2024, man, we have evolved a lot with smartphones. So anyways, I think I basically summarized it pretty well, so let's just move on to the next section. We've got the Apple A9 chip with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes on storage for this model. A lot of people think this is the first like Apple product really to have like 2 gigabytes of RAM. I mean like handheld product, but the iPad Air 2 actually first had 2 gigabytes RAM, and I actually did a video on that, so if you want to check that out, then make sure to subscribe and also look on my channel. But I guess if we're talking about iPhones, then yes, this is the first iPhone to have 2 gigabytes of RAM. So what you're going to experience with this iPhone is a mixture between surprises and also disappointments. At least for me, because I was actually pretty surprised when trying out different things on this phone. So for instance, web browsing actually performs really well on here. Watching YouTube or Netflix also does pretty well. However, the disappointments start to flow in once you start gaming. If you try to do any 3D intensive game, it's going to suffer pretty badly. So overall, it kind of really depends on your usage. Are you a person who does a lot of web browsing and watches a lot of YouTube, but doesn't do a lot of gaming? Well, in that case, the performance will definitely be okay. However, if you're like me, and probably many others, who prefers some 3D gaming and some other basic 3D games, this won't perform too well. If you want to see a full gaming test of a product that is really similar to this, then look at the iPad Air 2, because I did a full gaming test with that iPad and it essentially performs the exact same as this iPhone. So let's move on. Oh man, my least favorite part about this iPhone, the battery life. This is a 1715 milliamp hour battery. And wow, is this absolutely horrendous. I'm not even exaggerating or anything like that. It's terrible. If I'm doing any kind of gaming or taking 4K video or doing anything like that, it will deplete the battery insanely fast. I'm talking 1.5 to 2 hours of screen on time max. And what's worse is that basically any iPhone 6s that you're going to buy is going to have some sort of battery usage. Mine is on 82%, and oh my god, is it bad. It's even worse than when I first had the iPhone 6s. There's not much else I could say about the battery life besides it is terrible. And that's where really the iPhone 6s shows its age. It has a bad battery life, something a lot of newer iPhones or newer phones don't have. At least not to this level, that's for sure. Alright, so all in all, what do I think of this phone? I think there are a lot of good things about it, especially considering this is 9 years old. There's a lot of phones that can't even handle anything from 9 years ago. I mean, that can't even run anything. And this can run stuff. It can run stuff, it can record 4K video, and honestly, it doesn't particularly look like it's 9 years old because we have modern iPhones that have these exact same bezels and almost this exact same looking back besides, like I said, the glass back on that iPhone SE. However, the battery life suffers as well as the performance if you're doing anything that is 3D intensive. So that's where it really shows its age. Where it also shows its age is its price, because this you can easily find for 30 bucks, not something you can find usually on most new iPhones. So this is only going to be about 30 to 40 bucks, but for that price, should you get this phone? If you're wanting something with the latest iOS, with good gaming performance and battery performance, this is not going to be it. This is only something that I would recommend for maybe some sort of kid who doesn't really care about any of that and just wants to play some basic 2D games like Geometry Dash or something like that. If you're an adult that's working more than basically 5 hours each day, then you're definitely going to need a different iPhone or different phone than this. And if you're really on a budget, I would not also recommend this phone, and I would say just spend the extra 20 to 30 bucks. Or if not, just get a kind of cheap Android phone. Maybe get a $50 to $60 Android phone, and yes, it won't perform as well, but it will at least last you through the day if you need to make any calls or anything like that. Overall though, this was a really fun device to check out. It's still really interesting to see how a phone 9 years later handles itself, and I really thank you guys for watching this video and checking this along with me. So hopefully I see you guys in the next one, and peace out.